let's have a little look at some of the comments and responses from the left and from the right, and see if we can see if there is anything of benefit to be taken and learned from the murder of Charlie Kirk last week that doesn't really just generate more tension, more sadness, more pain, because that can't be the net result of this, can it?
I want to dedicate this next one to an absolute piece of shit of a human being. The pronouns were. Because if you chat shit, you will get banned. Rest in peace, Charlie Kirk, you piece of shit. Oh shit.
I'm just chatting to sort of a war veteran outside before, who was saying one of the main problems that we have now is people are reposting content that's antagonizing in spaces where people will have a visceral and negative response to it. So I was kind of reluctant even to play that. But you know, there's something familiar about that to me, like the kind of person I was when I was in my 20s, an agitator and an agent provocateur. And I wonder if in part Charlie Kirk taking his turning point talks to public places in order to literally create debate and to have conversations not with people who automatically agree with you, but people who vehemently disagree with you and oppose you, has in a sense contributed to a heightening sense of tension. Even though I would agree with the idea that if you're to diffuse these kind of tensions, the solution is to have conversations with people that disagree with you, to not objectify your opponents. I was thinking, am I able to watch Bobby Villan there sort of saying stuff that's deliberately provocative and rude and kind of mean-spirited and delighting in the sort of death of Charlie Kirk there, and be compassionate? And I thought, yeah, I think I probably can. I think I can look at him I think, yeah, I remember what it's like to act kind of crazy to get attention. I remember what it's like to sort of risk saying things like that in order to get a reaction. And actually, Charlie Kirk, of all people, would be totally down to have had a chat with him, wouldn't he? He would have been totally down to sit across a table and say, what is it that you believe in particular about Palestine and the genocide in Gaza? What is it that you particularly want to say about that? Like, Charlie Kirk didn't shy away from those kind of conversations. And I reckon that Charlie Kirk would have the spiritual maturity and fortitude to approach even that with forgiveness. And like, what I'll say as well is that a lot of people I've seen on the left that are delighting in Charlie Kirk's murder, I think it feels kind of performative and showy. Let me put it this way. I don't know what goes on in Bobby Villan's mind, or anyone that's using this moment for leverage for their own social media. And believe me, there's points where I think I don't even want to talk about it anymore, because I don't want to be a participant in this, even in a kind of somewhat mild and analytical way. But what I can tell you firsthand is when I was like 25 and working on MTV, and like 9/11 happened, which obviously now as an adult I look at that and think, my God, what a sort of a epochal, tragic, extraordinary event. How does that affect the sort of survivors, people that knew victims of 9/11, first responders, people that were in New York, people that were alive at that time, people that have relatives in the military? What set of interests are encompassed by those who genuinely grieve 9/11? And the next day after that, I went to MTV with like a fake beard on, a combat jacket, a tea-towel wrapped around my head, nativity play style, and instead I was dressed as Osama bin Laden. I remember my motivation was a kind of excitement. I was excited that the world was changing, that something extraordinary was happening. I'd read a little bit about Al-Qaeda and Osama bin Laden. I wouldn't have yet seen Alex Jones saying a group called Al-Qaeda are going to blow up the Twin Towers, even though he had 5 years before talked about that publicly. I sort of saw it as an indication that the world was changing, and indeed the world did change. Iraq was invaded, Afghanistan was invaded, Patriot Act was introduced, the internet went from being a place of intercommunication and openness to a place of surveillance and control. Google realized that their business was not a search engine but an advertising platform that would corral together information and pass it out to advertisers. The world changed radically. In my country, Tony Blair participated in the war against terror. What I realize now is that an event in the news will never be allowed to be neutral. People will find a way to deploy it and utilize it. People will advertise their affection for Charlie Kirk, strengthen their feelings of grief, utilize his death to tell particular stories, or they will condemn him and attack him. So I've watched people that are very much of the left talking about Charlie Kirk's death, people on the right. I'm like you, it's like all of us know this is something, isn't it? This is a moment. Because try and think of what's a comparable event. There isn't one. You might go, oh, what about the attempted shooting of Trump in Butler because it's a right-wing figure? Or you might probably, like Robert Kennedy did, you might have to reach back to the political assassinations of the 1960s to find something that resonates in this way. But the truth is that even though Charlie Kirk's views were really traditional, conservative and Christian, he's a modern phenomena as well because he's a social media activist. And that's a pretty new phenomena. That's obviously contingent upon technology and new and independent media. Whatever it is that motivated the person that murdered him, do you feel like that's the most significant thing? Because some people will say, well, what do you expect? This will be a sort of a common trope now and a somewhat justifiable one. With the constant condemnation of people of the right and the conflation of right-wing ideology with Nazis, isn't it clear that people would feel like that it was legitimate? What I suppose we're creating is environments where it becomes more and more permissible and likely that there will be events like this. That's probably the biggest concern, is the normalization of hateful vitriol as an ordinary method of communication. Online, we're all participating in creating communicative environments where that what passes as extreme is normal. Think of pornography. When I was a kid, analog pornography was hard won and hard come by, forgive the pun. Now pornography is abundant, and not only is it more abundantly available, it's more extreme. Like when I was a kid first looking at pornography, I weren't looking at, the kind of stuff that I understand is available now. Thankfully, I've been freed from the need to look at pornography. So do you think that something comparable has happened around rhetoric? And do you think that the availability and extremeness of porn affects people's actual sexuality in life? It does, doesn't it? Like, kids can't get it up, I understand now. Like young kids who are just beginning to be sexually active and are pursuing it as the culture dictates, promiscuous lifestyles where screwing around is normal. Their understanding of sex and sexuality has been informed by porn. Well, now, people's political rhetoric has been informed by online rhetoric, and I'm a participant in that. I feel like from now on, things are going to radicalize on both sides, unless some people deliberately and actively participate in creating respect and decent, good-hearted dialectic. That begins here, actually. That begins here. You can't be disgusted, appalled and kind of broken and confused by Charlie Kirk's assassination and then be angry and vitriolic about people that respond to it with delight. The test is this: can you, if you're a person who admired Charlie Kirk or loved him even, be kind and compassionate when people are condemnatory? I wonder if you can. If this generates nothing but exploitation and doubling down, with some people saying, well, violence isn't ever justified, but let's face it, Charlie Kirk was pretty despicable and he was a provocateur and an agitator, and in some ways he got what he deserved. Any version of that, I don't know how you can have that view and hold in your mind the idea that his wife and kids were there. Like, his wife and kids were there. It's like such a reset. It's such a reset of your reality. is such an etch-a-sketch of your reality. Or if you're like, well, because this has happened, we have to annihilate free speech, and this legitimizes further sanctions and controls and shutting people down, and people on the left should be ashamed of themselves. That's not the right idea either. If you're like, this is a no more bullshit time. This is a no more bullshit time. There's no question. But that no more bullshit is not let's enhance hate and attacks on others. That no more bullshit is, what am I going to give up in myself now? Am I going to give up financial security? Am I going to give up wanting attention? Am I going to give up caring that I'm getting older and that I'm going to die and that you're going to die? What is it that I've got to give up here? What have I got to give up? Have I got to give up doing this show? What have I got to give up? I reckon watch yourself. Watch if what you want from this is control or love. I reckon this might be important to you. Control is where you see yourself as a kind of personal sovereign of your own energy system. Love is where you see yourself as a participant in a greater energy system. I tried to keep that vague so that it was somewhat inviting, but the love is the instruction of God, is the nature of God, is the nature of Christ. And real love means sacrifice. That's what it means. It means sacrifice and obedience. And all these terms eventually collapse. It means feel the gift of life that's within you, the gift of your breath, the gift of your body, all of these things that you didn't give yourself, and be willing to act in the kind of grace that you have been the recipient of. What does that look like? That looks like, I suppose, praying for the soul of Charlie Kirk and the widow of Charlie Kirk and the children of Charlie Kirk, praying for Bob Villain and for his followers or fans or however you describe it, and ensuring that we are not, in spite of our colours, tribe or livery, just participants in polarization that will lead to further hate. That we are not, that we at least are neutralized and stepping out of it. That we're not doing that. That we don't allow polar vitriol to determine normal discourse. Remember back then in 9/11 when I was dressing up as Osama bin Laden, someone said to me, it's like there's extreme Muslims on one side that want to blow shit up, and then there's extreme Christians, you know, because the rhetoric of George W. Bush and Tony Blair was Christian rhetoric, and they were kind of, whether they know it or not, they were reaching to and relying on the language of Christianity for their war, and part of their empire is dependent upon that. We have to step away from the extremists on both sides, and really we have to probably acknowledge that that extremism is within us. But that's just what I think. Let me know what you think in the comment and chat. The world has become increasingly divided, politically, socially, and economically, but many of these divisions stem from a deeper misunderstanding of how money, markets, and policy actually work. Wouldn't it be nice if there was an investment app that was designed by people who understand a macro perspective and how global events affect your finances? And now you can have that power in the palm of your dick. Hand. That's hand, isn't it? Is that how I get confused? With the Alio Capital app, powered by Altitude AI, which identifies shifts in inflation, interest rates, and global risk, then adapts portfolios in real time. Alio is designed for hands-on or hands-off investors. Macro investing for people who want to understand the big picture. Investing is confusing. Get the Alio app to make it all simple. Go to the App Store or Google Play, or text my name Russell to 511-511. Investing involves risks, including the potential of loss of principal. Past performance does not guarantee your results. See terms and conditions. Tax fees may apply. This is a paid advertisement for Alio Capital, baby, in case you thought it was me reading Shakespeare. That was an ad. Over the past several years, Democratic leaders and their allies in the legacy media have relentlessly labelled conservative figures like Charlie Kirk as fascists, creating a toxic atmosphere that dehumanises political opponents and implicitly justifies extreme actions against them. Dehumanising language, or language where you say that a certain group are evil, that's the beginning of legitimising extreme responses. Kamala Harris, for instance, repeatedly called Donald Trump a fascist during her abysmal 2024 campaign, a term echoed by commentators on MSNBC and CNN who painted Kirk and his Turning Point USA organisation as a threat to democracy. There is no democracy. There is no democracy. There are sets of institutions that remain unassailable and unavailable to the directives of public will, regardless of which political party is in power. When people say democracy, they don't mean the ballot box and the will of the people. They mean these very institutions that are protected and unassailable. This rhetoric, amplified through social media cesspits such as Reddit, Blue Sky, portrays conservatives not as ideological rivals, but as existential dangers that must be eradicated. In the case of Kirk's assassination, we now have it confirmed that the 22-year-old suspect, Tyler Robinson, was found with Antifa literature and had used ammunition inscribed with 6 scrawlings about Kirk being a fascist, directly tying his motives to the very narratives pushed by leftist outlets. Here, you've heard Tyler Robinson was found with Antifa literature and used ammunition inscribed with 6 scrawlings about Kirk being a fascist. Look at this from Daniel Pinchbeck's Substack, where they've found Tyler Robinson dressed as Pepe the Frog. I mean, I would say, isn't that just a tracksuit? I mean, I think that's a sort of a bit of a reach, but elsewhere in the article it says he was described as a far-right groper who grew up in a gun-loving, Trump-loving Mormon family in Utah under the leadership of FBI Director Kash Patel, a former extremist podcaster and conspiracy theorist. The FBI flubbed their investigation, failing to find the shooter despite many clues. Robinson's father, a minister, figured out it was his son from the photographs caught by security cameras and turned him in. For those who don't know, gropers are an ultra-radicalized group of primarily young white men led by rabid extremist Nick Fuentes, a 28-year-old podcaster who screeches, cackles and spews contempt, this is the writer's words of course, like a tormented goblin. Notable statements from Fuentes include, I am just like Hitler, being right-wing is all about hating women, being racist, being anti-Semitic and the ever-popular your body, my choice. Unfortunately, we're seeing the ongoing mainstreaming of hate speech in the US, which ultimately leads to stochastic, I don't know that word, terrorism, vigilante violence, and it may get much worse. So here, you have one source saying Tyler Robinson was found with Antifa literature and used ammunition inscribed with 6 scrawlings about Kirk being a fascist. And here, he is a supporter of Nick Fuentes. He can't be both of those things. So which sources are being used by modernity and which sources are being used here by Pinchbeck? I suppose I've said what I feel about this now. Charlie Kirk represented a bunch of things. Open discourse, speaking to people that you disagree. Let's have a look at some of the left-wing commentary.
Let me ask you tonight, do you think Donald Trump is a fascist?
Yes, I do.
This is what kicking the shit out of fascism looks like.
Try to prevent the spread of the lawlessness and the fascist chaos that's been unleashed against us.
So when we say Donald Trump is a fascist, fascism, a huge component of fascism is uniting racism, bigotry, a form of racist nationalism.
We are now living in a fascist dictatorship.
We are worried about potential rise of fascism in this country. We're worried about our democracy falling to an authoritarian and potentially fascist form of government.
Not only to roll over to Donald Trump's will, but to roll over our democracy and allow him to take over this country as a fascist dictator.
When fascism isn't just coming, it's already here.
The former chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, Mark Milley, said, no one has ever been more dangerous to this country than Donald Trump, and he is a fascist to his core.
Okay, so that's sort of like the priming and branding of the Republican and MAGA movement as fascist. Some people really truly believe that as well. Agreed with conservatism, republicanism, capitalism and Christianity. You love Jesus. I feel that the aspect of Charlie Kirk's legacy that's of most interest to me is his faith in Jesus, because I feel that we, in order to not be trapped forever in the static and tension of the culture war and political disputes, we have to transcend. And I believe that there's only one pathway for that. But that's just what I think. Let me know what you think in the comments and chat. Thanks for watching the video. Have a look at this one over here, or join us Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday on Rumble.